Hi there and welcome to Infogol's World Cup preview. I'm Jake Osgathorpe and with me I've got Mark Taylor. How are we doing, Mark?
Great to be here, Jake.
Good. Alright, glad. Don't forget to download the free Infogol app. It's the football analyst at your fingertips. So we're going to briefly talk about things that to look out for in the World Cup. We're going to go through England in quite a bit of detail. We're going to look at who Infogol thinks are the best bets for in the outright market and the top goal scorer market, and any potential upsets and dark horses. So we'll start quickly with England. The squad was announced about a month ago. He went straight for the 23-man squad, did Gareth Southgate. Did he make the right decision with some of the players?
Well, Jake, the obvious big decision was whether to take Joe Hart. Joe Hart had played in most of the friendlies, most of the qualifying games. He was England's #1 goalie for 5-6 years. So to leave Joe Hart out of the squad was a very big decision. It was probably the right decision. We can make models to see how likely goalkeepers are to save shots, and Joe Hart had been particularly poor for quite a few seasons now. He certainly isn't the Premier goalkeeper that he has been in the past, and there was a lot of candidates queuing up to take his place who got better stats, and obviously were better long-term prospects because they're younger. Of the three, Nick Pope's got the best XG2 stats in that he saves more chances than you would expect from the quality of the shots he's facing. I think Southgate will probably go with one of Jack Butland or Pickford, probably Pickford. Last season they both had very similar XG performances. They're both slightly above average. Jack Butland's playing in the friendly tonight against Costa Rica, but I think Pickford's going to be the #1 choice. And it was a really good decision by Southgate to see that he is now looking at the age profile of the squad to not only look to tournaments at the moment, but also in the future.
Yeah, you mentioned the age profile. Just go into a little bit more detail for us about how England's age profile is shaping up.
Basically, age profile is when players start to improve, they reach peak age, and then age-related injury, and they start to decline. The peak age years tend to be between about 23, 24, and they finish about 28, 29. They start declining after that. Part of it is position dependent. Defenders can go on for slightly longer, goalkeepers longer still, because they're not required to run around quite as much as the outfield players. So it's quite heartening that quite a lot of the England's peak age players have got also quite a lot of their caps. About 60% of the caps belong to peak age players. So it's a really nice age profile that England have got.
Yeah, one of the main talking points from the England squad was the omission of Jack Wilshere, who many thought was England's most creative midfield player. Infogol data actually showed that was not the case at all, and the people that he was competing for the central midfield role with did actually outperform him in both attacking stats and defensive stats. So again, Gareth Southgate appears to have made a very good but bold decision to leave Jack Wilshere at home. So the big question is, how will England do at the World Cup? They're in a Group G with Panama, Belgium and Tunisia. The first game is Tunisia. Just sum up England's group for us quickly, Mark.
Well, obviously it's seeded, so Belgium the top seed, England second seed. So realistically, you are looking at those two to get out of the group. We've got England with about an 80+% chance of qualifying from the group, so to get into the knockout stage. In the group with them, they've got Panama. Extremely impressive performance to actually get to the World Cup, but it was possibly on the failings of other sides. We look at upsets during qualifying, and three of the biggest upsets were USA not winning games where they were dominant in XG. So Panama's position in the finals probably owes a lot to the failings of the USA in not progressing. So that Panama should be one of the easiest games that any team's played at the World Cup, but England are rather adept at messing up in these situations. But there's no reason to suggest that they will do this time. So yeah, we think England should comfortably qualify for the knockout stage.
Yeah, the other two teams are there, Tunisia and Belgium, as you said. They are both qualified deservedly from their groups, but they both come into the World Cup on the back of an easy qualifying campaign in the sense that their teams that they faced were quite high in terms of world rankings. getting out of the group, obviously you said 80% chance England have. The likelihood is they will finish second in the group behind Belgium. And in the knockout rounds, the team that they'll probably be facing is one from either Colombia, Poland, Senegal, or Japan in the adjacent group. We fancy England's chances in that game, in whoever they play.
Yeah, it's an interesting group. It's really competitive in that Japan are the least favoured of the teams to get out of the group from our simulations, but they've got a 30-odd% chance to actually qualify. So it's really a tight group. The two more fanciest teams, 60% chance, but you know in groups where the outsiders have typically got about a 10-12% chance of qualifying. That's a very competitive group, so it's not a foregone conclusion who England will play in the first knockout stage.
Getting through that game, reaching the quarterfinals, that is in the Infogol model calculates that is England's most likely stage of elimination. Partly because after having run hundreds of thousands of simulations, the most likely team that they will face in the quarterfinals is Germany, and we all know how that usually ends up.
It normally ends up in a penalty shootout.
And there's penalty shootout defeat. But there is a small amount of value in actually backing England to win the World Cup, according to the Infogol model, with the Infogol model giving England a 6.5% chance of winning the entire tournament. Can they do it?
Well, every team that's playing in the World Cup has a nominal chance of doing it. It's whether your chance that you give the team is similar to the bookmakers' chance that they give. So we are slightly more bullish on England's chances than the bookmakers, which is unusual because you would have thought the patriotic pound or whatever euro, I don't know, would have shortened England's price, but that doesn't seem to be the case this year. Although as we get close to the finals and all the friendlies are played, the prices may contract. But at the moment, we think that England have got a slightly better chance than the bookmakers.
And that moves us nicely onto the outright bets. So the Infogol model predicts Germany as the most likely team to win the World Cup. Not really a surprise.
No, I mean, obviously the most likely winners are the favourites, and the favourites on our model are Germany, followed by Brazil. We, as I say, we simulate the competition thousands and thousands of times, and based on the rankings that we've given the sides at the start of the tournament, we think that Germany are slightly more likely to win the tournament than Brazil.
They will have a relatively tough route to the final. The group is not straightforward and it is not a gimme. Coming out of the group, they would face most likely Switzerland, followed by England, and then it just gets tougher from then on in. The price of Germany has actually drifted in recent weeks based on the fact that they haven't won an international friendly in 5 attempts. But it is worth noting that they are friendlies, and in those friendlies, the opposition get 9 substitutions, so it does mean that it's a lot more difficult for Germany to wear down teams and break them down later in games, which is what they usually do. The other team that the Infogol model really likes approaching the World Cup is Belgium. Now Belgium, again, the same as Germany and England, there is actually quite a considerate amount of value in backing them to win the World Cup. You spoke about age profiles earlier, and Belgium's is a really good age profile too. Yeah,
Belgium have got quite a nice rump of players who've not only playing within the peak ages of between 23 and 28. They've also amassed quite a few caps. So the peak age players, and they're also experienced players. I mean, the likes of Hazard, Courtois, Lukaku, De Bruyne, Alderweireld. They all play now at the peak of their professional performance, and if the golden generation that Belgium has produced over the years is going to actually lift silverware, this is probably the tournament where they will have the best chance of actually fulfilling their promise.
So they're Infogol's 2 bets in the outright market: Germany, who are available at around 5-1, and Belgium, who are available at around 11-1. So moving on to top goal scorer bets. Obviously, it's common sense that the teams that go furthest in the competition are more likely to have a top goal scorer because they have.
Well, they have more opportunities to score. Obviously, they've got, by progressing in the tournament, they're also one of the better sides. So they're going to partake in more mismatches. Particularly in the group stages where teams can score 4 or 5 goals. If the bigger the mismatch between the teams, the more goals you get, and the more goals that are scored by the favourites. So, but also, there's an opportunity to play 7 games. You could play in the 3rd or 4th playoff. That would also make 7 games. Whether the managers then would rotate the squads to give players who haven't had an opportunity to play, a chance. But there is potential for players to play 7 games.
So obviously the Infogol model thinks Germany have got quite a big chance of playing all 7 matches in the World Cup, and the obvious player to look at is Thomas Muller. He is a mainstay in the German team. He scored 5 goals in each of the last 2 World Cups, and during qualifying he was a key player really in terms of getting on the end of chances that were being created for him. He is available at 33 to 1, which is a huge price for a player that's scored 10 World Cup goals in 13 World Cup games. A group of Sweden, Mexico and Korea gives him plenty of opportunity to rack up a few early goals, and as I've already said, the further you go in the competition, the more opportunities you are going to get to score. The other player that stands out in terms of value is Romelu Lukaku. As we've already said, Belgium, we fancy them to go quite far in this competition. They scored 43 goals in qualifying, they create a lot of chances, and Lukaku is their main goal threat. He was averaging 1.1 expected goals per game in qualifying. So it is highly likely that if Belgium do create chances against Panama and Tunisia, Lukaku will be on the end of those. He's available 18 to 1, which, as I said already, does represent quite a bit of value. So Infogol's top goal scorer bets are Thomas Muller at 33 to 1 and Romelu Lukaku at 18 to 1.
Yeah, I mean, Lukaku, as you say, he's got on the end of high quality chances. He's got a load of creative players playing, setting him up. So yeah, Lukaku does appear to be a decent bet.
Dark horses in the competition. There is usually one team that does surprise quite a few and gets quite far in the World Cup. In 2010, you could argue it was Ghana who managed to get to the quarter-final stage. This year, you've picked out Uruguay.
Yeah, I mean it's calling Uruguay a dark horse when they've done quite well in previous competitions. Their qualifying campaign, they play in the South American qualifying campaign where they do face quite decent sides. It's 40% of the sides qualify from their qualifying group, but they do face the likes of obviously Brazil, Argentina, so they do face good teams in qualifying. And if we look at the XG, which is the amount of goals that we think Uruguay should have scored or conceded based on the quality of the chances they allowed or created, they were quite unlucky in qualifying, and they played better against teams such as Brazil who actually beat them. They did create a lot of XG, so Uruguay's qualifying campaign was probably a little bit more impressive than the bare results show, and for that reason we've got Uruguay rated slightly higher than the bookmakers, and although we don't give them a huge chance of lifting the trophy, it is a couple of percentage points higher than the bookmakers. So if you want a team to follow throughout, possibly on a game by game basis, or to get to probably outperform their finishing position or their elimination stage, Uruguay is probably a team to look at.
And it is worth mentioning that Uruguay are in what looks to be a very winnable group with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and
Russia obviously as the host. They are automatically top seeded. Whether they deserve that or not is probably up for debate, or probably not really up for debate. So they are in a relatively weak group.
Yeah, and Uruguay are 11 to 10 to win that group, which, from what you're saying, looks a very good bet at that price.
Yeah, I mean, Russia have played only friendlies, so their FIFA ranking has fallen, because FIFA ranking is based on the type of games they play, and if they're playing friendlies, they're weighted less than actually full qualifying games. So Russia aren't rated particularly highly, and we haven't necessarily seen them in a competitive environment for quite some time. So we'll only find out how good Russia are or aren't, when the competition starts. But there's good reason to think that Uruguay are, good value, not, in the outright market, but also in all the auxiliary markets that go towards that.
Another team that could potentially be a dark horse is the reigning European champions Portugal. Now, they showed in the 2016 Euros that they are very good when it comes to knockout football, going to extra time a few times, obviously winning the final in extra time. That is, for me, quite key when it comes to a knockout tournament, that they are capable of going all the way really with teams. They're not afraid to sit back and defend. They're very organised. But as they showed in qualifying, when they need to, they can be very, very, very good going forward. They've got one of the best players ever to play the game, Cristiano Ronaldo, leading them. They have the potential to upset a few teams and potentially reach another final. Their price is around 25-1 right now to win the tournament, which looks slightly overpriced, but I think they're definitely another team to keep your eye on in Russia. So
and obviously, as teams progress throughout the tournament, their prices will contract, their chances will contract. If one of the big teams goes out, unexpectedly, it will drastically alter the simulations that we can do, and the prices will alter accordingly.
So moving on to any potential upsets that we can see during this World Cup. There is bound to be a few upsets.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how you define upset. I mean, we're talking about USA losing to Guatemala, was it, in qualifying, when they created loads of really good chances, and Guatemala didn't create many, but they took two, and USA didn't. So if you define that as an upset, if we looked at qualifying, about 10% of games were upsets. So if we roll that over to the tournament, that's going to take place in a week's time, we should probably expect about half a dozen upsets of that nature. By the fact that they're upsets, we can predict that there will be upsets, but we can't necessarily predict which ones they will be. We can only really look at what we've cast as the probabilities, and if we are more optimistic about a team's chances than maybe the bookmakers, then that's probably one way of trying to eke out a value bet or a possible upset.
Yeah, in terms of group bettings, one of the upsets that the model does seem to quite like is Egypt in Group A, mainly because no one really knows what to expect of Russia, and I think it does play into Egypt's hands that they do play Uruguay first without Mohamed Salah if he doesn't make it back for that game, leaving him to lead his country against Saudi Arabia and Russia. So they could potentially cause what would be an upset in the betting in Group A. So that's everything from the World Cup preview. We have just released some World Cup team guides which go into a lot more detail on every team playing in the World Cup, and it does provide a special bet for every team. So that's 32 teams covered and 32 value bets. Go ahead and download that right now, and don't forget to download the app. It's the Football Analyst at your fingertips. Thank you, Mark, for your company.
Yeah, and I'm sure we may do another one of these as the tournament progresses, and as I say, once the games get underway, then all the simulations change as well. So there'll be news coming daily from from Infogol about how results that you've just watched have affected not only the chances of the teams that have played, but the chances of teams they may or may not meet in the future.
Thanks for watching, and let's enjoy this World Cup.